plan really is, first of all, to share a bit of information about TED in terms of where we're up to. We're now up to year 2 of our collaborative, so it's been great. Some of you have been with us right throughout that 2 years. Some of you are more recent. Some of you joined us at different points through that. You might have been with us a year or even less than that. So it's always great to share with you some of those things that we're learning and how TED's developed over that time. It's always really exciting. I know Sam will say the same, and we love to get your feedback, and that really does influence what we do this year and how we build on that. So one of the main topics I want to cover today, and something which I've mentioned to a few of you in our coffee catch-up events that we've had over the last few months, is two-factor authentication. So I'm going to show you some of the things that are going on in the background around that, just to give you a heads up of what that might look like when it becomes live on the site. Then we're going to do our main focus of today's session, which is around TED with staff survey. And Sam's going to be sharing some details of the work that we've been doing and our plans of how we're going to use staff survey results and how TED's going to be a big part of that process. We'll have a little bit of a break, but then really what we want to do is encourage you to share your ideas. So like Sean just mentioned that tip, you share things that you're doing in your trust, things that have worked well, things that maybe haven't worked so well, and where the learning points are from those. And our real goal from today is really to collate all those things that we can share right across our collaborative to give you ideas of what you might want to do with that staff survey information, but also how TED can be part of that process and how TED can really help give you a platform to build on and build that engagement and keep the momentum that you might get from your staff survey results as well. So just a reminder of our sort of collaborative ethos. So we created this right back when we first developed our collaborative. So those of you who were there at the start, we're part of building this. But our intention with this group is really to be present and curious. So learn from each other, participate and share, listen actively, and respect others, and think around how we can benefit each other. We're all in this together. We're all working in very similar organisations with similar challenges, but similar opportunities as well. And that's really what these sorts of events are about, so that we can grow together, learn together, influence how TED works for us and really shape it in a way that meets the needs of both ourselves and our organisations, but most importantly, the teams that we're supporting through TED. Okay, so in terms of numbers, so as I say, we've just come up to year 2 of our collaborative. Since it seems longer than 2 years, to be honest. We've done so much throughout that time. But we're really proud of all the things that we've achieved together, and I want to say a massive thank you to all of you who've been part of that, whether you're on the call today or you're watching the video back. But we've now got over 250 colleagues who've been trained in how to support teams with TED. So they've come on TED accreditation training with myself, and they're now supporting teams out in their organisations right across the country. Since launching the website in 2022, we've seen over 2,500 team leaders trained and registered on the TED platform. And in that time, over 2,000 teams have completed a TED and are using it together to support their development. So I think that's really exciting that, you know, so many teams are engaging with it right across the country. We've seen 11,300 staff members contribute to feedback. And I know I put that stat on there a couple of days ago, and I know that's gone up even since. So it's great to see that number ticking up every day. And when you think about it, each of those responses is helping a team understand their current context, and it's helping teams understand the best way to deal with perhaps challenges that they're facing, but also giving that opportunity to celebrate and recognise what they've done together. To support your organisations in our collaborative, we've run 18 events over the past 12 months, and that includes our monthly coffee catch-ups, which I know a lot of you come to every month. It's always great to see you. Our lunch and learn events and quarterly deep dive analysis like today. So as part of that collaborative, what you've helped us to do over the last year is to further enhance the TED system. So those of you that have been with us since the start will know that there's been improvements over that time in terms of how you can access the data, different features within the system. So you've helped us to enhance things like the data reporting that we've got in TED. I think back to this time last year, and we just got those data sort of Excel exports, but over the last year we've refined what that export is doing for us and how it's showing our data and becoming useful for us, and that's something we really want to build on as we move into 2024. Last year, we also implemented the follow-up TED feature so that when teams come to repeat the TED process, they can compare and contrast against their previous TED. So that's been a really well-received feature, which again, we want to refine and build on as we go forward. And through action learning sets, your input through events like this, you've also helped us develop numerous support resources, whether that's support resources for yourselves as TED practitioners or new toolkit resources. And I've got some to showcase for you today. So massive thanks to you all for contributing towards that. In terms of key information and updates to sort of signpost you to at the minute, mainly on system features. We've got some in the pipeline, and I know we've talked to a few of you about this in the past. We have mentioned it at some of our coffee catch-up events, but our big priority at the moment is to enhance our reporting dashboards so that it's not just the Excel export that you get, but something that's interactive and gives you real-time information on your dashboard screen. So that's something that our developers are currently working on. I've got a few slides to show, just showcase what we've asked them to do, and also about our user list exports. So I'll go into those now. I am aware if you're at last month's Lunch and Learn, we will have showed you these already, so I'm not going to dwell too much on these, but just to give you an insight into some of the things we're thinking. At present, in your TED dashboard, if you get my laser pointer out, you have a survey export and a trust data export, but something which a lot of people have asked us for is a user export, so that you can understand how many users you've got on the system, also who's engaging with TED, and be able to see that at a glance. Also in there, in terms of that first screen that you go onto, you can see a graph which is on your numbers of uptake by year, but what we feel would be really useful is the ability to be able to filter that down by months or by quarters and look at that data in different ways so that you can see where maybe there's peaks and troughs, and where you can think around how have perhaps your comms generated interest and generated uptake in TED, so helping give you more intelligence from the data that's in there. Something else which we've also asked our developers to work on is in the reporting features that you get, to filter out surveys which we will class as not really a real TED. So any surveys with less than 3 people invited or less than 3 respondents, we want to be able to filter those out of your reports because we know they might just have been a team leader testing the system or something which has been set up but hasn't yet been converted. So we really want to sort of refine that so you're more confident that the data you're looking at is a true representation of the activity that's going on. In terms of that user export, what we wanted to put in there really was just a way that at a glance you can see the numbers of users that are in your system, but then also look at things like when did they last log in, how many active surveys have they got, how many archived surveys have they got. And I think where this will be really valuable for yourselves is you'll be able to filter out team leaders who maybe have done the training with you but haven't yet converted into doing that TED, or even those of you that have been on for quite a while. You'll be able to see team leaders who've maybe engaged with TED, but it's over 6 months or maybe even over 12 months since they last logged into the system, so that you can give them nudge reminders, maybe signpost them to events or support that you're putting on to really keep that momentum that you've got going with TED. So I think that will be really useful. It'll definitely be useful for us, and I'm sure you'll find value in that. Just on that, this is what we've sort of shared with our developers. I do want to caveat all these are just our sort of concept designs. So as soon as these are ready, we'll be sharing these with you from what our developers have put together. In terms of your data, what we'd also like to see on our dashboards is breakdowns of some of the key measures. And this is all really around helping you understand the impact that TED is having in different ways across your organization. So things like looking at the quantities of team leaders that are being set up month on month, also the amount of participation in different quarters, and the number of TED activity, and this should help you understand where that activity is happening, also maybe where it isn't happening, and where perhaps you can tweak your comms or change your approach in different ways. And again, a reminder that this will filter out any of those non-TEDs that haven't got more than 3 responses in there, so you can be more confident that that data is a true picture. A couple more of these. So also what we'd like to show you is something like this. So against the key sort of themes that are in TED, against our 8 different themes that are in there, just an overview, but also be able to filter that. So you've got it at a trust level, which is currently on there at the moment, but being able to look at that from a divisional perspective, or maybe even looking at how this changes over time. So looking at that by quarter may help you understand how maybe different events or different changes in the organization are impacting on these sorts of figures as time goes by. And finally, we want to give you more insight into what the questions are saying to you. So you'll be able to, at an organisation level and at a divisional level, look at which are your highest performing questions. So where are the things that your teams get really do really well at, but also what's the lowest scoring questions as well, and where there might be themes in there which you can perhaps use alongside things like your staff survey results, or use to target your support in different ways, or to inform your OD work and the work of other departments in supporting the teams across your organisation. So as I say, these are just concepts at this moment. So our developers are working on putting that in there, and in the coming months, we'll hopefully be able to show you that, and there'll be a go live date, which we'll make you aware of when there'll be some changes to the system, and you'll be able to access all that useful stuff to help you use TED. Next point in there is in terms of toolkit resources. So I have a couple of new ones to show off to you. So recently, if I just share my screen, we have one on an SBI feedback. Those of you aware of the SBI feedback model, I'm sure you'll have seen something like this before. If I just bring my screen up. So recently at Lancs Teaching, we've run some workshop events for our team leaders on how to deal with challenging feedback and how to build a positive feedback culture in your team. Because we recognise that this is one of the challenges that a lot of team leaders have, particularly when you're brand new to TED, and something which team leaders can often be quite apprehensive about in, what if you get some challenging feedback? How can I best deal with that so that it doesn't undermine the work that we're trying to do? So the SBI feedback model is really an approach to help team members, but also team leaders as well, give feedback in a positive and constructive way by talking about the situation, the behaviour and the impact. And if I just scroll on to the next couple of pages, so what this does is it gives some role play scenarios which teams can use. It does advise in there they can use their own scenarios if they wish, that are sort of super relevant to what they do. But essentially it's a 1-hour workshop activity that a team can pick up, used to prompt conversation, to prompt some thoughts around what does feedback mean to us, what feedback helps, and what feedback maybe hinders how we work. So it gets a team to really visualize what good feedback looks like, and that's great for teams to be able to build on to what they do in TED. This can be something, I think some teams may want to use this before they do TED, but what I've suggested to a lot of teams is do your first TED, and then you can reflect on how well that went and how maybe some of the feedback really helped, some of the feedback was hard or difficult to actually action, and you might use this as a toolkit workshop to be able to improve from one TED to the next. So useful resource there, I hope you'll agree. And the next one, something I've recently put together that we have a fair bit of requests. So this is around the challenges that teams get when they grow. And I know this is something we've experienced in our team at Lancs Teaching Hospitals as we've grown over recent years. But many teams, I think, have changed quite a lot throughout the pandemic. And for teams that grow, it can often mean that things like communication become more complex, or how you work together it changes in some ways, because if you're a team who's all working in the same office together, it might be quite easy to understand what each other's up to or what's the best way to work together. But as you become bigger, you maybe occupy more than one office, or you become dispersed. That can be a real challenge. So what we've done here is create a resource which it's not really a toolkit in itself, but it's signposts to useful toolkits for those sorts of teams that are growing, or perhaps bigger now than they were in the past and are going through that sort of change, or maybe they're trying to grow as a team and just encountering some of the challenges that happen there. So on this resource, what we've done is highlight some of the key themes that you might want to address when you're a team that's growing. We've got a description to describe how you might want to approach that, but then we've signposted to some of our other existing TED toolkits that might be really useful for teams working on these sorts of areas. So again, that's come from your feedback, from feedback we've had in our trust as well, and from teams that we've seen out there. And I'd like to do more of these sorts of things as we go throughout this year to help teams of different types understand which toolkits might be right for them. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. I'll come back to my slides. Any thoughts on any of those while I'm just getting my slides back up?
And feel free, if there's a tool you want us to work on, or just a topic, please whiz it in the chat and we'll get cracking on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We're always keen to think of new toolkit resources. So if there's ever anything that you don't see in there already, let us know, and we're keen to produce that. Sean, would you like to come in?
Just curiously, I think your tools are fantastic, but I know questions that will probably be asked by certain factors is, where's the evidence base for this? And, you know, is there some background evidence of some of the tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there isn't really one answer for that. I think some of the tools, there's definitely evidence to show how they work. Some of them really are just general OD tools that we put together. So things like, I always talk about my favorite ones, the circle of influence tool. And I must admit, I'm not aware of any studies that actually have sort of measured the influence of doing that sort of thing. And that's maybe something which we can aspire to in TED. As we get more and more teams using these types of tools, we can start to learn on what's the impact of teams doing these sorts of activities. So I'd say for some of the tools in there, there's absolutely research, and you'll notice on some of the tools we put references to where they've been used and utilized in different settings. Others are more just sort of general OD approaches and things you might build in and that we might use when you're maybe going in to support a team. So yeah, does that help, Sean?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's definitely something we can aspire to with TED as we begin to learn more and we see teams use these different things. I think things like the case studies we produce, and as we see more and more teams use our toolkit resources, we can start to see, well, what's been the impact of doing that sort of team building exercise, or reflecting on how communication works for us. So absolutely, I think that's a really good point. Okie dokie. So I know Sam's keeping an eye on the chat for me, so that's great. So go on, Sam.
I was just going to say, it's only me putting stuff in at the moment, okay. So don't worry, I've covered it.
No problem. Okay, so the next topic that I'd like to go into today is around two-factor authentication. Now, just as a sense check, can I check if you've heard of two-factor authentication before? So if you could either put a yes or a no into the chat and just let us know if this is something you've come across, or if it's just a new term to you. Okay.
Majority yeses.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm glad to see that, because it is something which is relatively new, but I think we're seeing it more and more across different platforms that we might use. And I think some of you likely already use this in your organisation. I know it's something which we've sort of phased in at Lancs Teaching over the last couple of years, where maybe you're logging into your Office 365 account, or it's definitely something that's been used by banks for a number of years. I think when you're logging into your online banking account. Oh, that's wonderful. I think nearly everyone's put yes. So that's brilliant. So yeah, just as a summary then, what two-factor authentication is and how it might apply to TED as we're looking forward in the future. So at the moment, when you log into TED, you've got your own individual password, and our team leaders have their own individual password. So two-factor authentication really is a situation where your password alone isn't all you need. So really it's an extra security measure to help protect the data that's in TED really, and make it as robust as it possibly can be. So it still requires users to have a password. So every user, whether it be yourselves, who might be trust admins, or a team leader, they will set up an alternative factor to log in. So you'll have your password, and then there are a couple of options which we're looking to build into TED. So what you might have come across, and I know we use in our trust for Office 365, is a mobile authenticator app of some type. And there are lots of different ones of these that work on different types of phones, whether you're on Android or an Apple phone. And you can get something like Microsoft Authenticator or Google Authenticator, or a range of other ones that will work with this type of platform. However, what we're also mindful of with TED is not all users will have their mobile phone on them at all times when they might want to use this, particularly people who work in areas where maybe they don't have the mobile phones, or they're not allowed for it. We still want them to be able to access TED. So what we built in is an alternative measure. If you don't have your mobile app, you can also receive an email with a unique code to be able to log in to your system. So the benefits of this, really, we recognised when this first got sort of ventured by developers about putting this in, we recognised this will impact users, and we're really keen that this doesn't become a barrier to our team leaders being able to use it. So over recent weeks, and since I think just before Christmas really, we've been speaking with our developers around what's possible. We've also looked for feedback from our IT specialists at Lancs Teaching and our information governance teams about what that potential switch might look like, and look to get their experience from when we've gone through a similar change with our Office 365 approach as a trust. So the benefits that we'll gain from two-factor authentication are focused really on the security of the system, and most importantly, users' data. So with a more robust process, our users and our organization's data has a greater protection against any cyber attacks or even password theft as well. So when we spoke to different users about the system, most users said they'd use something like this, whether it be in online banking, or they already use it in the trust, or they use it for online shopping. Things like Sainsbury's Online and things like that might use it. So we also learned that from an information governance perspective, this has now become a feature of what's called Cybersecurity Essentials Plus, which some of you may be aware of, but we know that most organisations in the NHS sign up to this, and when we onboard new trusts, it's always one of the certificates that they look for us to have. So what we want to do with this is ensure we're still compliant with that, but in a way which doesn't create much of a barrier for our users in using it. So what I'd like to do now is just demo what we've got on our development site. So again, I'm just going to share my screen with you. I'll show this to you. Just bear with me. Here we go. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Yep. Marvelous. Okay, so I'm logged into our development site here, so it might look a little bit different than your live TED site looks. But what you'll notice is at the top of my screen, I've got sort of an announcement in there. So multi-factor authentication has not been set up for my account. To continue access to TED, I must enable multi-factor authentication. So I can secure my account by enabling it in my profile. So what I get here, I can actually click on this text if I want. And when I do that, all it does really is take me down to the profile section. Now, I know if you're anything like me, you probably don't ever access this tab, but it is there for every user. So under the profile section, you get the ability to be able to update your password in there. And what will come in there, you can see your browser session, so you can see when you've logged in, but you'll get this two-factor authentication bit. And what you can do from here is select whether your preference is to have the app or whether it's to have an email to be able to log in. And what this will do is when you log in, it will send you a unique code either to your email, or you can open the app and it'll give you a time sensitive code that is correct at that point in time, but will change in the future. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to put it on email because that's something I can show you up on screen. But I can then click enable. I need to put my password in again. Hopefully I remember this because it is a bit different for the dev site. Okay, so that has set up two-factor authentication to my email. It also gives me the option to set up on my phone. So if I wanted to do that, I could scan this QR code and it will add that to either Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, or whichever app I'm using. But to set it up for the first time, it will ask me to put in my own unique code. So I'm just going to come over to my emails. I'm going to very briefly, hang on, let's see if we can get both of these on screen. I'm going to be a bit fancy now. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. So I've got an email here. Oh, there we go. I've got an email here with my new security code that's coming there. And you can see it's only valid for 3 minutes. It gives me the time that I've got to use it. And if I pop that in, paste that in there and click confirm. So that is now activated on my site. So it will now show me that I've enabled two-factor authentication. If I come back to my dashboard, you'll notice that that message has gone at the top. And if I log out and log back in again, there we go. Sign in there. It asks me for a code. So because I've put that onto my email, I will receive another email reminder. I'll not bring this up on screen. I'll just copy and paste it in. Oh, there we go. And there we go. So I've logged into the system. So there are a few extra steps to get in, but hopefully once it's set up and users become familiar with it, it will become more second nature for them to use it. I'm just going to stop sharing at that point. Christine, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Thanks, Lee. Just a quick question, really. I'm just curious about with this two-factor, is it only happens to having to use the code when you are using a new device every time? Or, for example, would it be asked for a code every time I try to log in from my laptop, which most of the time I log in for?
Yeah, so this is something which we've been talking to our developers about. There is the option that we could have it so you just do this once and then for a period of time it will remember it on your computer. What that would require though is it would save a cookie on your computer. If you know, cookie just sort of saves that setting. So if someone's logging onto the same computer all the time, they won't get that message every time. They will get it periodically because it will only last a certain period of time. and if they log into a different device, so say I logged in on my mobile phone, it would ask me for it again. So we are looking at that. What that would require is we'd need to slightly change our data protection agreements with each organisation, because that would be an extra thing that we're saving on the computer of the user. So there is the potential to have that, and we're taking guidance from our developers on what's the best way to do that. What's your thoughts on that, Christine? Is that something that would be useful?
It would be useful for security, so for cyber security reason, definitely. But I think it will be only useful if we don't get asked every single time if we using the same device and the same VPN, etc. Because in the event of when I'm out and about doing meetings face to face, and then I try to quickly log on, and then I have to go for an extra step on maybe potentially delivering training, for example. That, you know, that could be a small challenge at the time when it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'd agree. And just before you come in, Sam, I think definitely, and probably that will be more from our point of view as practitioners who are perhaps logging in more regularly, that would be an extra convenience. So I absolutely agree with that. Sam, what's your perspective?
I just thought it'd be useful to share that, you know, in an ideal world, we wouldn't want to do this. And we also know that there is pressure to make sure that we have got cybersecurity in place, because whenever our contracts are going through with new clients, or even when you might have to do a regular update on your IG processes, this could be a question that comes up, and we definitely wouldn't want it to be something that would stop clients from using TED. We really, really want to make this as simple as possible. So we really understand everybody's maybe concerns, or maybe kind of wondering about the challenges that might come with this, because we know if a manager goes to log in for TED and there's one thing that could get in the way, that could prevent them from doing that thing, and then they'll just move on to something else. So we are really mindful this affects us as much as it affects you. We want to get it right, and so all of your views are really welcome here. If anybody else has any thoughts on this.
And I'm just going to come back to my slides, because I think that is my next slide actually.
Oh,
Just one thing to add to. I know I couldn't show you the authenticator on there, but essentially how this works, and I'm sure you must, I think everyone put yes in there, so they've used something like this. In terms of the app, get my pointer out, first stage, you download the app to whichever mobile device you have, you click add code, and it brings up your camera to be able to snap that QR code that comes up on screen. When you click scan QR code, it then just adds it in, and you'll get your unique code with a time sensitive point on there. But yeah, wanted to ask your views at this point, so appreciate your questions, but I guess also what I wanted to ask you to give us some feedback on is what considerations might there be from team leaders' perspective, you know, and what might you need to help you communicate this to team leaders? I think it's something we really want to get right before we activate something like this.
Yeah, I think I'll just pick up Chloe's point as well. We've been really clear with the developers. This can't be something that just lands and that's it. We need a phased approach. We need to be really clear on when, how it's brought in. So just to answer your question, Chloe, there might be some deadlines, but they wouldn't be hard and fast deadlines, I think, is what we're thinking initially. But again, that's why we were doing this, to get your views. And then that's a really good point around, can we see who has set it up and who hasn't? I wonder if that's something we can, if it's not too late, to add into the user export.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing, and I can't see a reason why not, because our developers' answer to a lot of things is it's in the database, so we can have it there, so it will be something that is recorded. So absolutely, yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Just making a note of that, Chloe, thank you.
Yeah, Kim, yeah, good question about how it can be implemented seamlessly. So I think that's one of the things we definitely want to be really careful about how we do. As Sam says, it's not something we just want to say, oh, it's going live on Monday. We want to give you lots of time to be able to understand how this will work, what it will look like from your perspective, as well as a team leader perspective. Sean, great idea. Yeah, a filmed version, so a little demo video, absolutely. And I think this brings as well to the way I sort of visualize this, and this isn't fixed in stone. You'll notice we've not set any dates yet. We want to take your guidance on this, but definitely if there's anything you think we can add to this, absolutely. As I say, we want to get this right. So the way I've sort of set this out is in 3 distinct phases. So the first phase really is about comms and awareness. So what our intention is to develop a user guide, so a really short, simple 1 or 2 page walkthrough of how you would set this up and what it would look like. That will be useful as something that you can share with team leaders, whether it's those who come on your team leader training or share with existing people who are using the system. A video demonstration, as Sean said, just a quick walkthrough of how to use it. So if you get stuck with it, you can dip back into that video and say, oh yeah, this is where I go, this is how I set it up. What I also want to produce is some slides that you can just slot into your team leader training, just so it can be a little extra thing, just to remind team leaders about when they're first getting involved with TED. Also in phase 1, what we'll be doing is then communicating with you our planned timeline. So we'll give you a goal live date to aim for, so you know when this is going to come in. As I say, it's not going to be a short thing. We're going to give you plenty of time to look at that. But then really it's about throwing it over to yourselves and you communicating out to the people who you know will need it, and getting that comms right. It's something we'll be doing at Lancs Teaching, so we can share whatever we do, but also we'd encourage you to share anything that you use to help communicate this, and we can distribute that throughout the collaborative. Phase 2 then would be a stage where we're sort of in between. So we put it onto the system, but at that point it wouldn't be mandatory. So users would get that reminder at the top of the web page to set it up. What we'd also perhaps put in there is a reminder of the date when it will become compulsory and when it would go live. So what we'll be looking from you at that phase is let us know at coffee catch-ups, at these sorts of events, lunch and learns. Let us know how it's being received, what team leaders are experiencing, if it works okay for yourselves as well, and that will help us sort of understand any extra support requirements. And then phase 3 there finally is when we do go live with it. So we're thinking later on this year, we'll say, right, from this date, this is when it'll go mandatory. And from that point, anyone who logs in, if they haven't already set it up, they'll be asked to set it up there and then. And for other users who have set it up, it will just become part of the norm with that. And again, we'll constantly be reviewing this, trying to make it as straightforward as possible, and support you throughout the process. Sam, would you like to come in? Has anything been coming in the chat?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring Mark in. And yeah, there was a couple of comments in the chat that we can come through. I noticed Mark had his hand up, so come on in, Mark.
Bless you, Sam. I've sort of put the comment in that I was going to make. It was really just to kind of, personally, I think it will be a barrier. I think there are great sort of the intentions of two-factor authentication are very strong, but the application of it, my experience of it in a number of different guises hasn't necessarily been particularly positive, particularly initially, and it does worry me that it would potentially be a barrier. And we're kind of getting a bit of momentum now in our trust, and I kind of don't like the thought of something getting in the way of that, but I also appreciate that it's something that may need to happen. The only other point that I sort of raised, my experience with 2FA tends to be around the protection of really sensitive information. So you have it on things like your banking apps, and you have it on, you know, confidential patient records and things like that. TED, the way that it's set up, which I think is brilliant, doesn't tend to hold very much personal information. You've literally got names and an email, which arguably is already accessible in other ways if it's work related email. So I'm just, and I'm really sorry if I missed it because something sort of happened this end, but I just wondered what the sort of the basis was, the need to implement it with TED. Sorry.
No, it's a really good point, and I think Lee and I have both kind of dragged our feet with the developers on this, haven't we, Lee? And we're like, yeah, we'll talk about it another time. I think it comes down to the cyber security certificate. Is that right, Lee? And I think their concern is they will not achieve the tick list to enable them to have a cyber security certificate. So I suppose one of the questions I think I just paused in the chat was, we probably need to understand how important cybersecurity certificate is for trust processes. And I don't know if that's something that you guys could take away as a question, and maybe just forward to your IG team. If you want, I'm happy to kind of do a paragraph that I can send to you all, and then you can just copy and paste it and send it to IG. So you might as well just us do one, and then everybody has it. And then if we could maybe do a bit of a pulling together of that would just give us that confidence that actually it is something we 100% have to do. Don't know, Lee, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you raise absolutely relevant parts there, Mark. I think that was mine and Sam's concern when this was first broached to us, that the whole sort of USP with TED is that it's something that's accessible, it's simple to use, you can pick it up and go with it. So anything that adds an extra layer into that is, it's sort of going against what we want TED to be. So we're really keen to make it as straightforward as possible. That being said, that trade-off is that compliance with that cybersecurity essentials. So we did talk at one point around, do we actually need that? Is that because, like you say, TED doesn't contain super sensitive information. It's got people's emails in, but there's nothing like patient data or any sort of really sort of sensitive data. So we sort of wrestled with whether that's a need or not. I think the challenge we had is, we're sort of in your shoes, that we want the best possible user experience, but we had to appreciate that from someone in IG's perspective or in IT's perspective, they sort of value that security perhaps, well, definitely more than us, but they are more on the other side of that trade-off with user experience. So I spoke very closely with our teams, our IT and IG teams at Lancs Teaching, and what they said to me is when they went live with 2FA for Office 365, they did experience that challenge at first, and probably for the first sort of 3 to 6 months they were getting calls, and there was that challenge. But after that sort of phase, they quickly sort of went down. People just got used to it as the norm, to a point where now, I think we're about 2 years into this, they say they don't get any calls around two-factor authentication. It's just something that's the norm. So what they said to me is that times have moved on a bit. People use two-factor authentication for a lot of things, like we saw in the chat. Everybody's aware of what it is, but what they said is the important thing is to get that comms right before you roll it out, and the more you can raise that awareness and prepare people for it, the more you can minimize that sort of abrasiveness of when you first release it. So that's why we're so keen to get this right in terms of the comms and the rollout. Sean, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Thank you. I get what you're saying, Lee, about the 360. I think there's a big difference though, that people have got to use 360 in their workplace, whereas TED, it might be, I can't be bothered. If they're going to make me jump through hoops, I can't be bothered, and I don't really need it within my work. Has there been any consideration? I just picking up on Mark's point, the team leaders and the divisional leads have very minimal access to information. Have you thought about a blended approach where administrators have to have this double login, but the team leaders and definitely the team leaders definitely can just log in individually?
Yeah, we did talk through this with our developers, because I agree that from a team leader's perspective, if a team leader's account was hacked, someone would only have access to that 1 or 2 TED reports that team leader has, where it's more your sort of trust admins, your divisional leads perhaps, who have access to that breadth of data. So we put this to our developers, and they said that is something that we could implement, but then it wouldn't really solve the need for it, because it would still mean we're not eligible for Cybersecurity Essentials certificate, which would be a sort of a non-negotiable with a lot of IG departments for a lot of organizations. So it really, that wouldn't actually solve what we're trying to achieve. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it don't tick that box, then it don't tick it, does it?
Yeah.
And I do think we are, we saw from this group, when you asked who's actually used it before, well, I think everybody says, yeah, I have.
Yeah. So I think a lot of users will have had this in some capacity with another platform, but we are conscious, and I do totally take on board what Mark was saying and what you said there, that because TED isn't something that's compulsory, there's the danger that as soon as someone hits a barrier, they'll just decide, oh, I haven't got time for this, or I'll try it another day, and then they put it off forevermore. And we're conscious of that. That'll be relevant to our users just as much as any other trust. So we're so keen to get this right. And I think part of that is making sure new users understand it from the word go, so it doesn't feel like an extra step for them. It's just part and parcel. And for the users who have been using TED for a while, we really communicate what it's for, why it's important, and how it's not too complex if you follow some simple steps. So yeah, that's what we want to do. I don't know, Sam, any other thoughts from yourself?
Just that whilst we think that this is important and the developers are pushing for it, this is the purpose of this conversation. We'll take some of your questions away. I'm not going to say it's not happening. I'm not going to say 100% is happening. I think this is our first discussion. If you can also find out at your end as well around what might lost my words today, what your trust might need. So if I create a short paragraph, if you could all forward that to your IG provider teams and tell me what they come back with, that will be a really important sort of trigger as to whether and how quickly this moves forward. We totally agree with everything you're saying, so thank you for your feedback. It's definitely not going to be something that is rolled out imminently, but we will take our time and we'll work with you on this.
Marvelous.
Bear with me. So the aim of this introduction, as opposed to how we do it at Lengths Teaching, is because I was talking some things through with a client the other day from Somerset, and he was like, oh no, this is brilliant. So I hadn't really planned to show all of this, but he found it interesting, so I thought, well, maybe everybody would. So apologies if this feels like it's a bit us just showing you stuff, but it might be helpful. So here we go. In terms of staff survey, this is the first year really I was leading on staff survey, and the first, because previously we had a colleague who was doing that and they've left, so it came to me this year and I knew nothing, never done the staff survey before. It's like sort of managing the cycle, but I'd learned a lot from previous people, and Lee's been showing me loads, and then I kind of came up with some key aims this year. So part of it was around increasing the pace of cascading data, improving the support for divisional leads, really starting to focus on understanding the data, because I don't think our team leaders do. It's too big, it's too much, and I think they struggle. So I wanted to think differently this year about our data. And what you'll see as well is, I don't know if anybody else uses Picker, but we get this wonderful RAG, which is absolutely, in my mind, useless. And our team leaders don't like it because it often looks like a sea of red, because you're comparing them to the trust, and that's not helpful. So I really wanted to change how we even just presented the data this year. I really wanted to improve governance and accountability, and I'll tell you a bit about that. Access to the data, because actually I don't think everybody in our managers always got the data as well. I don't think it was cascaded, even though we would send it out. This year we kind of changed that. We're like, do you know what, we're going direct to managers. So I've got a list of around 1,500 managers and supervisors, and I just go straight to them. What else? Yep, signposting, so really improving how we do that. Really thinking about how we could develop our identification for TED support. So previously we've kind of looked at maybe our red teams, our bottom 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever we felt like we were doing that year. I want to change that a bit because often they're the same teams. And then I get this impression that there can be teams out there that are struggling, but they're almost hidden because they don't make enough noise. So actually I wanted to think about that differently. And then, yeah, stronger visibility in terms of targeted communications, and then also celebrating our high performing teams and how we might do that differently. So we started doing some stuff last year with them, and then I'm going to enhance that further this year with my team. When I say it's a big we, you know, it's a massive team effort. So that was the aims, and then just skip through. I always come back to this because this underpins our approach and how we interlink staff survey with TED. So in our view, everybody has a part to play. So whether it's at a corporate level in terms of OD, whether it's divisional leadership teams, team leaders themselves, and actually team members, we try to make it really clear that the staff survey isn't HR or ODs, it's theirs. And we kind of push that in our language. And as you can see running throughout this, we've implemented where TED is appropriate and how people need to use TED. So one of the key things, I'm sure we've said this before, but I'll just say it again, you know, we get people saying, oh, well, that data was from October, that's not us now. And it's almost like a get out free clause. So we say, okay, run a TED, get the most latest data and work with that. You can look at your staff survey, you can look at your TED, and then take your action plan from that. So it gives you that up-to-date, more insightful data. And then otherwise, some team leaders will say, oh, I haven't got a team report. So I say, okay, no worries, do a TED and also work on your response rate for next year. So that's sort of how we position TED. And then, of course, we need to make sure that team members aren't just passive in this. So we talk to them about how it's their role to participate in the TED and be involved in the action planning as well. So working with Heather in my team, we identified 5 key work streams, and then underneath there's like 5,000 actions under each one. So I'm just going to highlight some of these areas. And as I'm going through them, what I'll do is I'll pull out the resources that we created and kind of physically show you on screen. And then we'll send some of these out as well with the follow-up email. It might be useless. I'm not saying that these are the right way to do things, but who knows, it might be helpful. And also I steal from all the other trusts out there. So you'll see, I think some of the things I put in here is from Gateshead, from their lovely manager's guide from last year. So I just kind of pulled that apart and made it work for me. So yeah, here we go. This is something I'm going to try and do. Right. So the first thing we did at a corporate level is obviously analyse all of our data quantitatively. But I wanted to look at the quality of data in a bit more detail this year. I don't think we've paid enough attention to it previously. And often it's because there's so much to do. But with Heather being new, she had a bit of time to really focus on that. So one of the things I wanted her to do was look at every single free text comment, and we get around about 800 we had this year. And we've identified the sentiment in each one. So some is positive, some is negative, some is both. And then we started to sort of highlight which themes. I'm sure everybody does this anyway. But what was really nice was that we could use this then to focus on what overall sentiment was, what themes we could see, you know, high level, and then sort of the sub themes. And this just really helped us to focus on our corporate board papers and then start to move this into our corporate action plan. For me, I want us to have action plans that I know I can put in a you said we did. So if I can't say and point to something, then it's not going in our corporate action plan this year. I don't want, you know, we're going to improve managers. That's not going to be helpful. So I want really, really tangible things this year. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing. And then the next thing for Heather to do on this is she's going to take all the comments that are related to IT and send them to IT and say, can you come up with one action you're going to do? And that will go in the corporate action plan. All the catering comments are going to catering. They're going to have one action. So it's almost like our corporate action plan isn't OD's responsibility on its own. There's so many of the teams that contribute to that. There's comments in there around estates, there's comments in there around sort of finance team. So we're actually spreading this so that there will be at least 5 actions in there that will be responsibility of other people. So when I talked about governance and accountability, we're holding everybody else to account, not just ourselves. And then comms plan is key to the corporate level work. So we've come up with a weekly focus on staff survey where it tweaks every week, looking at all different layers, because what I don't want to do, which I think we did last year, and it was mainly my fault because I was trying to do too many things, we didn't have that regular communication around staff survey, so it kind of dropped and then nobody talked about it. And what that says to the staff is that, oh, it doesn't matter. So we're really focusing on increasing our corporate actions this year, our corporate comms. So that's that. And then at a divisional level, what we wanted to do again was share the data packs differently with them. So I'll show you one of them. No, wrong one. Here we go. So this is the division of surveys pack. So we've, again, instead of giving them the RAG that they've had previously, which doesn't always help because they can't see all their data in one place, we pulled across a different pack for every division. And yes, it took me forever, but it was worth it because very quickly they could see their high level data, where they've improved or where they haven't. They can see the number of questions they've improved, maintained or declined. We've put their data together because that picker doesn't do that automatically for our division. So I did that. And then also we put the filters on because very quickly they can go, right, which are our lowest scoring areas, which are our highest scoring areas, and they can start to tweak it. They can go, oh, let's just do the themes, right? Let's have a look at what people think in our division about our managers. So they can pull that out really quickly. So that was one of the key tools we wanted for our divisions. We focus them here first as well, because they always start over here and then what they do is get red and then they disengage. They're not interested in the data anymore. So this year we've said, look here first, look at where your improvements and changes are, and then have a little look over here and see if that's meaningful too. But this for me is the most important. Are you improving or not against yourselves rather than thinking about against the trust? And then they get all their data for every single, so this is department level for us, that they can go through as well. So that was the first thing we did with divisions, and we got that to them by January, and we wouldn't normally have done that. But as their leaders, we're allowed to share it internally. Then the next thing that we did with divisions, I can pause, by the way, am I talking too much? Is this helpful? Yeah, maybe. Okay. So then the next thing that we did was send them a presentation for their February meetings. And it looked a bit like this. I won't go through it all, but it kind of explained to them, and I'm sure you all do this, so I'm not saying that we're doing something different. But what we did do this year that was slightly different is we focused on their progress first, which I think was really helpful for them. And we said we were going to look at their data in 3 ways. Where are you making progress? Where are your highest and lowest questions? And then, you know, where are you in terms of the benchmark? And then we asked them, we gave them some clear things in terms of what they were going to do. And we're really sticking to this. Every month we're checking in with them. So, for example, this month, we've sent them this slide that tells them, where are you up to? This is what you should be focusing on now. That, you know, we're going to be coming back to you in May for action updates. We're coming back to, and so we're really kind of being firm on ownership and being firm on accountability this year, making sure that they know, because we did have a couple of teams last year when we had a CQC visit, they had no staff survey action plan in place. So reminding of them of that, you know, you don't want to be where you were last year. So that's another thing that we were doing. Follow-ups, clear deadlines. And then we talked, you know, we've made them clear that they need to have a you said we did in September, and we're keeping their eyes on. Before you know it, everyone, it will be the launch for October. So just really keeping them on track, I suppose, is that for us at divisions. At team level, in February, we have a manager's update every month. So early February, we did an introduction and we shared some of the high level results and told them what they were going to be getting, when they were going to be getting, and what the expectation was. Again, I think this is a gap for us. So I think previously we've sent out results and it just doesn't cascade to the people that actually need them. So that's what we've focused on this year. And so we've got around about 1,500 managers on my email list. And we sent them this email. Here's one I made earlier. Oh no, it's not. There we go. Oh no, wrong one. Apologies. Told you it was going to be a bit messy, didn't I? Right, so they got this email. It made it clear. So they got it on embargo lifting day, but we told them in advance and we showed it them so that they knew it was coming. So we told them what they were getting, all the templates. If they were new to Excel, why don't you watch this video? What they need to do next, and we just gave them these are your 3 steps, and then where they could join a support session. So that was the main thing that we did differently. And again, we wanted to give them access to their results, because using the RAG just doesn't help them. So I created this dashboard. I couldn't tell you how I did it now. It was one long dark night in Excel. But essentially you can select your team from here, and it tells you your team response rate data comes through. It kind of gives you an average score, so that is very crude. It's just adding up all the numbers and dividing by the number of numbers. But where your average score has changed, I think it's been quite helpful. It just gives you an indication of whether you're improving or not. And then again, it does have the comparative data to the trust, but we're focusing them on themselves, because how can you compare a team in surgery to perhaps corporate? It just doesn't work, does it? So that's what we're doing there. What else did I have to show on here? Oh yeah, so then some of the resources we sent, and I'll send, oh no, just close that down. Try again, shall we? You're recording this, yeah, brilliant. So we sent them like a manager's checklist, because I think some of them struggle as to where to start. There's 100 questions in front of them. So we tried to break it down into some simple steps and give them some little coaching or prompts to consider. We then gave them loads of templates, so everything was there, even sort of, here's an email typed up for you to how to share your results, and then here's a team discussion template. So we just tried to pull everything in one place and keep it short. So it's just a two-page checklist there. We gave them a bit of a how to explore your results and how to sort of type up an action plan. And then there's a presentation somewhere that it won't be anything that will knock your socks off, but that's one of the other things that we gave them. What else was there under the managers section? Talk through the dashboards and the checklist. And then for the high performing teams, we've also sent out this. So to those managers, we just wanted to let them know that we could see that their results were improving, and that we could highlight their achievement, because I think they don't get, all these positive messages. So we also gave them a little thing that they could put on their board, so that they could celebrate. And then we also invited them last year to a bit of a learning session, and we're going to do that again this year. So that was what we did for team managers. Shall I finish off? Yeah, I'll share all these. Yeah, no problem, Kim. So that finishes off the team level, and then I'm going to talk about enhancing team staff survey support next. Is everybody okay? Is there any questions at this point? Shall I just stop talking? I feel like I'm just talking a lot. Yes, come on in, Christina.
I was sorry, I was just wondering where you put your threshold for a high performing team. Where does that, when do you decide you're a high performing team?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I suppose I'll start with where we decide our lower ones, and then it's the opposite of that. So previously we might have just added up all, so this is the RAG that you can see here. So what we would probably have done is counted how many reds and how many greens someone got and how many oranges. And that was kind of as crude as analysis that we did. And then we would say, well, who are the ones who've got the most reds? They're the teams that we need to work with. But I think that was a little bit lacking in that just because you're red doesn't necessarily mean, or green doesn't necessarily indicate whether you're good or not. So for example, you could be green, but you could also have like 30%, but because if the trust is 30 28, you're green, but actually that doesn't mean you're good, does it? So I wanted to do things slightly different this year. And again, it is a bit crude, it's not perfect. We don't have time for that, I suppose. But what I did was I created 3 measures. One was just your average score. So if you added up all your scores, what are your overall average percentage? What is your We Are a Team score? So that was just going through the questions and identifying which questions are team working. And then what's your overall engagement and morale score? And that was, again, just identifying which are the engagement questions and morale questions and just making an average. So I did that for 23, and I also did that for 22, because that would enable me to see if people are improving or not on all those measures. So then I pulled through the summary here. So this column here has got all of our teams, where they were in comparison to last year as well. So once I could do that, I was then able to identify low scoring areas. So I scroll through here. I first of all looked at average staff survey score, and I just pulled out the 50 lowest scoring teams on this one. And then I looked at which ones were the biggest drop. So you could still be a high scoring team, but actually if you're dropping considerably, I might need to have a conversation with you to see what's going on. And hopefully if we're intervening here, we might be potentially stopping that from going further and further. So that was the thinking. I'm not saying it's sort of a strong theory, but there we go. And I did the same for We Are a Team and the same for engagement and morale. So with all those 50 teams, obviously that was 300 places were available, and some of them landed in multiple areas. So then I pulled that final list of who was on those 300 places, and I counted up, because some people were on more than others. So for example, this portrait, they appeared on 6 times in those different measures. And from that, we've kind of then created a divisional list of teams that we're going to work with. And we're just working our way through that, because we wanted to encourage the divisions to have a conversation with us around, are these the teams we should be working with or not? Because they might have a team that they know needs our support more. So that's how we did it. And then we're applying the same theory to the high performing teams as well. So which ones are showing progress? And I'll probably change the language to say in progress, high progress teams and high performing. So they've got the 2 slightly different ones there. So that we're celebrating those who are on the way up, not just the ones that are already there. Is that okay, Christine?
That's great. Thanks so much. We've also used Picker, and so it's just my first time too, and just good to contrast and compare. I do have a follow-up question for you, which you might get to later, but I was just wondering if you or anyone else had thoughts on kind of connecting the staff survey results, perhaps on that We Are a Team. How do we connect those staff survey results to the TED resources and say, look, these are your scores here. This is what TED can do for you. Thoughts on that now?
No, that's a good point that I missed, actually. So we created a toolkit that does that. So we used the We Are themes from the People Promise. So for example, what we're saying is, if you're low on these questions, this is good for this. So good for improving team connections, team culture. So if they click on that, what they've done is, well, first of all, we talked about use TED. And then we're saying, I want to improve role clarity. So there's some people have said in their questionnaire that they don't understand what their roles are, they don't understand the roles of the team. And then we've linked to the TED activity that might help you do that. I would like to develop a stronger sense of purpose in my team. So they say, why not try this tool? And that's got the team charter tool. So that's how we're also linking to TED, because all of the things that we would want our teams to do are in TED. So there's no point in keeping them separate. So trying to bring them together. So yeah, that's our little toolkit and how we integrate it with TED. The last thing I'll cover in the enhanced team support. So where we're up to is we're going through and capturing notes in case anyone in OD has already worked with these teams, identifying a team support person, putting in some staff survey data. We're also then going to pull in sickness, absence, turnover, all these kind of freedom to speak up details. Are they TED trained? Do we know any TED dates, reflections? STAR is our accreditation, so whether they've got bronze, silver, or gold on our board accreditation, if it's relevant. Not every team will be part of that. And that will help us just create a benchmark, because we're hoping when we do this next year, these teams will have seen some shift, or we might have, maybe we might have reduced a bit of turnover. I don't know. That's the goal, isn't it? And then what Lee and Heather are going to be doing next is sort of creating a program of activity. So it's like a menu, and most of these things will be the ones you might use. But as an OD practitioner, we want to give a bit of a box for people to move freely in. So if you're working with a team, in our OD team, we would be saying, have they done staff survey feedback with their team? Yes or no? If not, that might be the first thing you want to do with the team leader. Have they done a TED? Start with that maybe, if it's right. Do they need to do the civility session? So we've got off the shelf kind of activities that we can do, and there's one in TED. Do they need to do something around recognition? So it's almost like they'll create a package for the next 6 to 7 months that they will sort of hold hands with this team leader a little bit. And the part of this is to obviously shift the staff survey, hopefully for next year, shift some of those benchmarks, but you're also role modeling it and you're building that team leader's capability. So hopefully they'll be on their way, and then next year we'll pick up some new teams. That won't work for everyone, we're not daft, but hopefully we'll really be adding some value, because our theory is if we move 30 or 40 teams, we will shift the overall staff survey results. So that's what we're trying to do. And then, have they done a TED follow-up? And then how are you going to help that team leader prep for the next staff survey? So we're looking at working with maybe 30 teams over the next year, or next 8 months perhaps. So that's what we're doing for enhanced team support. Nearly done now. So for all colleagues was our last little box on here. So if I come back to this. So what are we doing for all colleagues? We did the team vouchers, which I think has been really successful. So instead of giving sort of initiatives or like a voucher for 50 people who've completed the survey or whatever, we wanted to do something that was team focused, because we are very much, that's our aim. We want teams to, so instead of like one individual getting a £10, £20, £30 voucher, I said, well, what if we give a team voucher and they can spend it however they like? And everybody's done something different. Here's just a few. Not that one. This one? No, here we go. Yeah, so we gave a £100 voucher to a certain number of teams who got high staff survey response rates. And we just asked them to go off and spend it however you want. And people really did different things. So some people, was the one that bought, gave them all a bit of money to go off and buy some nice stationery. And they're like, it's so nice that we had £3 to buy a pen. You know what I mean? It's like those small things. Some people did some really nice things, which was impressive, where they spent money, their voucher, to give to the Salvation Army. Some people, there it is, the staff love being able to choose something nice to use in the workplace. Some people went off and just bought loads of Easter eggs, and they all just did that. One team bought, they went to Argos and bought coffee. They basically did loads of stuff, and I think they just liked that they had a choice and a bit of autonomy, and it felt nice that it was a whole team celebrating their staff survey results together. And so we did that again this year, and I think people really enjoyed that. And then the last thing that I was going to mention was our comms. So we're giving all the results on our intranet. It's all open and transparent. So even just, a nurse on ward A could go and have a look at her own team staff survey results. And our nudge in our comms is going to be, here's your staff survey results. Have a look. If your manager hasn't shared them with you, give them a nudge. So managers are going to be getting it from us. They're also going to be getting nudges from colleagues as well, because they're invested in this. And we've got the seniors as well. So really hoping that this year will make a difference. Do we all say that every year? Yes, we do. But we'll just keep trying, won't we? So that's everything really from me. I will share everything. I'll probably have to remove sensitive data from some things, but I'll give you the framework perhaps of the dashboard. I did say that, I could maybe run a lunch and learn on how to do that in Excel. If A, I could remember myself how I did it, and B, it's very hard to do lunch and learns IT wise over Teams, so we'd have to have a little think about that. But maybe I could put the formulas in so that you can see them. I don't know. But I'll send you everything. If it's useful, great. And if it's not, that's okay. Do your own thing. That's everything from me, Lee.
No, thanks, Sam. I think that's absolutely marvellous, the work that you put together there. And I think you sell yourself a bit short when you say it was one night with Excel. I'm sure it was multiple nights and days looking at spreadsheets, which I think it really will be worth it, though. The sort of value we'll hopefully get from that is a lot more understanding of how the things that we're doing with teams, like TED, amongst other things that we do and we suggest to teams, how that's moving the dial from one staff survey to the next. So I think this is really going to be useful for us. And I think something which we're also hoping for is it'll give us lots of great case studies as well, because we'll be close to the journey that those teams go on throughout this year, and we'll know the types of things they're engaging with. We'll know what the starting point is in terms of how the results look this year and the trend that they're currently on. And then we all hope that when we come to look at them this time next year, that some of them have moved off that list, and the ones that haven't moved off are moving in the right direction, and there's a clear pathway for them. And hopefully we built up some of that confidence that doing things like TED, engaging with some of the training and support resources that we've got, is really starting to have that impact on them and move them in the right direction. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Sam. And as Sam says, we'll share whatever we can. We have to be mindful of what might be sensitive in there. But if you'd benefit from any of those templates and things, then by all means use them, and let us know what you're doing as well, because we're always keen to, as Sam says, we like to pinch with pride in the NHS, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's always good when we can share things and pool our resources. Okay, so just coming back to our slides, if I sort of go through. Okay, so what I wanted to move on to now was just really think around what your experience is with staff surveys. So maybe reflecting on some of those things that Sam shared with you there, but also thinking around what you're doing in your own organisation, maybe reflecting on what's worked in the past or what hasn't worked in the past, and what you learned from trying different things. But what I've got for us is a little bit of a whiteboard activity. So again, let's just see how the technology works. I think this should hopefully come up. Hopefully everyone can see that. Oh, I can see everybody popping up now. It is one of my first times using whiteboard, so you will have to bear with me with this. But the idea around this activity, we can all interact with this whiteboard. And down the bottom of your screen, you'll have like a little toolbar where you can add post-its or even text, or there's a little speech bubble if you want to add comments on different things. But what I'd like us to do is have a think around what we currently do with staff survey. So that might be what you've seen that we do at Lancs Teaching, or what you currently do, which we think would be strengths, what might be weaknesses with our current approach. Also what might be opportunities, things we could get involved in the future, things we could try, and what are threats to the success. So what are particular risks that could mean we set off with all the best intentions, but something could derail that, or be a concern that we need to be mindful of, and think around how we sort of engage with that. So I'm just going to zoom in on the strengths first, if I can. Just bear with me. Get to grips with my mouse.
While you're doing that, Lee, I just thought I'd mention the whiteboard doesn't record is one thing I've learned.
Okay.
So it won't be on the screen. You might want to cut this bit out of the record.
That's really useful. Thank you, Sam. So what I will do following this little session, I'll share a snapshot of the whiteboard with our email that we send out, so you can refer back to it. Okay, so one thing I can do with whiteboard is click follow me. So if you're elsewhere on the screen, it will bring you to where I'm looking at the moment. So I'd like to ask you about strengths at first. And now if you want, you can click on, there's a little picture of my face in the speech bubble up there. But the questions we'd like you to think around strengths is, what benefits do you see of using TED with Staff Survey? But also, what do you currently do well, or what do you see, what's that good practice that you currently see happening? So feel free to either add a post-it note if you want, but we'll type in as you go along if you'd like to just come in and share. So please feel free to pop your hand up if you have any thoughts on that. I can see some people are in there already. Okay. Overlapping themes we've got in there. I don't know who put that, but would anyone like to expand a little bit on what you mean by overlapping themes?
That was me, Lee. I think that the themes are very similar. Like there's themes in the staff survey that are also in TED, and I think that the ability for to have a repeat measure almost, so that you've got the staff survey, but then let's do TED in the meantime, is really a strength of the tool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's somewhere where it really helps users think around how they can use the staff survey result if they see that overlap, and how something like TED will give them practical next steps. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. Christine, would you like to go in?
Yeah, I can see this very busy on the whiteboard, so I thought I'd come in and speak out. So I think at the moment, what I've been using the staff data for is going back with the original baseline measure. When we look at the team working scores and the engagement scores, alongside with the retention rate, vacancy rate, sickness absence rate. So that is for the overall trust score and data. And then I start looking into the teams that because I've been in the journey with TED for just over, coming up 12 months. So going back to the beginning of the journey, who the first 6 team that started TED, and then looking at those team in specific data into staff survey under the People Promise scheme of We Are a Team, and then engagement score for those specific teams and the team working scores for those specific teams. Now, really interestingly, they were seeing the result is that the teams that have been constantly practicing TED with their team members at any capacity in terms of team meetings or away days on a regular basis, and the team leaders that attend the community of practice that we run on a monthly basis, where we all have the peer learning session. Those are the teams that have had positive result, and in comparison to the other 3 teams that we don't often see them at community of practice, and we don't really hear from them since they have run a TED survey. So we understand that we have different pressure and in times, and then priorities might have changed since. But what I can see so far from the staff survey is that the teams that has shown interest and proven that they have continuously practicing TED, and the leaders to engage with their TED coach will have a positive impact on their staff survey results. So that is down to the teams level. So that's really useful. Thank you.
Marvelous. That's excellent. Yeah, and really good to hear that you're starting to see those shoots of positive results in your staff survey from teams who've been engaging with TED. I really like you mentioned about trying to align it with other workforce metrics as well. You mentioned about retention data in there and other things that might contribute to that. I think that's something we're really keen to do in our trust, and sometimes it can be quite complex that when you are looking at one set of retention data. You've got teams in TED who might not necessarily be named the same thing that they are in your ESR dashboard. You've got your staff survey results as well. So it is complex to do that, but it's great that you're already seeing that value in it. And I think that sort of evidence is really good then to be able to show to teams who are about to get on board with TED that if they really engage with it, then these are the sorts of results that you can see. You can see that positive impact, and there's something tangible there for that work that you're going to put in. So that's really helpful. Thank you so much, Christine. Fab. Okay, so I'll just read through a couple of others. Justine, you've mentioned using staff survey to engage people with TED resources. I know someone else mentioned about sort of coordinating those resources. I think Kim's put about aligning the tools with staff survey themes as well. I think that is a really good idea, and again we can share what Sam's done from our trust perspective, but it is good to be able to signpost to different themes and how different resources might be useful, and that's definitely something we want to do more of with TED, because we're aware there's such a wealth of information on there, but often some of the challenge is finding the right thing at the right time for the particular situation that our team's in there. So wonderful, thank you very much. So I'm just going to slide along now. So if we look at weaknesses, so again, if you're not following me, I'll pull you back to me. So in terms of weaknesses, what we're thinking here is what is a challenge, or what feels difficult about the current approach with staff survey? And again, that might be from what you've seen from our perspective, what feels like that might be a challenge to make that work in your organisation, or maybe from what you're already doing, what feels a challenge or feels difficult to be able to maybe get to stick with teams or different areas, or what's difficult to get over the line, I guess. So again, feel free to fill in the post-its are there, or add a new post-it yourself, or if you want to just pop your hand up, and Sam and Jude will be listening in, and we'll add your point as we go. Just give you a sec to do that. Any thoughts? Anybody want to come in and share anything on their mind at the moment in terms of what feels an uphill struggle maybe with staff survey results? I'm going to come back to you, Sam. Looks like you've finished one of yours, but yeah, team leaders' time is difficult.
Yeah, I'm just saying, having said that, I think if there's any time to get in there, it's now. I feel like our team, personally anyway, in our trust, we're just coming out of what it was awful couple of months with boarding and the pressure that people were feeling, and I think if we're going to do anything, now is our window. So I really want to, that's where I think it's our best time now.
Yeah, definitely. Christine, did you have your hand up again there briefly?
Yeah, I just thought I come in. I think our weaknesses at the moment will be asking. We're not quite sure that who is the ownership of actually looking at the survey data result, and then to connect with the leader at the divisional level and teams level. So it's really interesting to see what Sam has presented. It's some great resources there. At the moment, our staff engagement manager would be looking at leading on the staff survey as a project as a whole. So we will be producing reports, etc., but that's it. We stop there. No one sort of delivered those message, and again it's back to how it's back to the team level who actually completed the result. We don't have any. I feel like we don't have anyone taking the ownership of it. We're not sure if is it supposed to be sits in OD or in staff engagement, or is it HRBP? Which area that sits in at the moment is who will come up to us and say, here is our challenge, and then we sort of support them. But our weaknesses is I don't feel like we are proactive enough to have something like this. So I'm curious, Sam, who takes ownership at your trust to sort of deliver
Um,
this?
So I suppose essentially it lands with me and Heather in
So
terms
it's
of the
OD.
cascade, identifying the teams. We do like to speak to the divisions. I think there's a sense of they need to have an input in who we work with. But also we're going to go to people anyway. So I think we give ourselves permission to do that. It's always in a supportive way. We always say, you know, we're here to help. So yeah, I think that's us who takes that ownership.
It's
Is that
great
right?
because if you have the capacity within
Yeah.
your OD
Yeah, I get
OD
that.
team, that's great. I wish we
Well,
have this.
we share, yeah, we kind of share it as well. So one person is doing the do, but then everybody across OD and L&D and EDI all get one or two teams to work with. So that's how we kind of spread the load, I think. So, you know, I'll have two teams, Lee'll have two teams, everybody across, you know, whether they're in L&D, EDI, OD, engagement, we all work together.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's a really relevant point there, Christine, and something which we're familiar with, and that's why Sam's come up with this great approach and trying to make the data more accessible to teams so that they can take that ownership, because I think one of the big challenges that I'm sure other trusts see and we've seen historically is teams get or different areas, they'll get their staff survey results, but then maybe there's a culture of thinking, oh well, that's for the organisation to sort out, or that's something OD come in and sort out. And I think we've always got to sort of tread that balance between we want to help and support and get involved, but not to the stage where we disempower teams and take that ownership away from them. And it can be a difficult thing to change. And I'm sure we'll get to this time next year and there'll be things we think, oh, actually we could do this extra thing, or we'll take a slightly different approach. But I think what's really great about that data crunching that Sam's done is it makes that information more accessible so that team leaders can understand more what's relevant to them and they can go and do it. But yeah, as Sam says, we try our best to sort of manage that workload and do it in a way which, I guess it's the TED approach essentially at a different scale. It's about supporting without getting too involved and taking that away. Just to summarise some of the points, I've noticed quite a few people have mentioned time constraints. I know that's a big thing around staff survey. Obviously, there's so much you can potentially do with staff survey, but it does come around so fast. We think, oh, it's once a year, so we've got a year to plan for it. But we don't really, because we only get the results part way into that year. And then the embargo only lifts even further into that year. So really, we're talking around what can we do now to start that ball rolling? And then how is the next staff survey part of that ongoing cycle for teams in different areas? So yeah, excellent points. Okay, we're out of time, so next I'm going to go on to opportunities. So that'll bring you here. So what we're thinking with opportunities is, are there any opportunities for you to do something new in your trust, maybe other ideas that have been shared today which might be helpful for you? Are there new things which you'd like to do maybe in the future, or in a perfect world, if you had the time and the capacity, what would be a good thing to do? So just share some of your ideas on there, and I'm sure these will be useful for different members of our collaborative to be able to think around how these things might be possible, and maybe things we can work on together to think around actually how might we bring something like that into the new year, or how do we integrate TED in some way, or what new things can we develop in TED that will help that approach. So let's give you a minute or so to type in there. As always, if you'd prefer to unmute yourself, we'll try and capture any thoughts that you have on there. Lots of things coming in there. Yeah, Christine, you mentioned developing leaders' capabilities. Yeah, I think that's a big one. And again, hopefully TED is part of that solution. It's not the whole solution, but it's part of building that capability and capacity for team leaders to be able to engage with this sort of stuff. But I also think, coming back to what you were saying before, the more you can get those stories of where it is working, the more you can encourage a team leader that it's worth that effort and that time that they might be putting into something like this. So yeah, excellent point. What else have we got in here? Justine, you mentioned correlating staff survey results with other workforce data. Absolutely. I think that's a great opportunity to do that. I think it's not always as straightforward. I think we've had lots of conversations in our trust around, in an ideal world, it would all be in one system where we could pull it all together. But it's around how can we use the data that we have at the moment in the best way possible. And I think Sam's example is a great one of how we can start to pull that together and learn something from it. And hopefully, doing stuff like this will also, I hope it can give us a platform to be able to influence organisations like Picker and say, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could do this for us, if you could cut the data in this way and have it presented in this way. If we can show the value in it, then we can also start to influence that way as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sam.
Yeah, I've had many a conversation with the main manager there, just explaining to him what we need. And I think we are going to pay to do some work on, they do a HTML dashboard, and I've told him it's good, but it's not there yet. So I said, if we pay, if we have the money, I don't think we do, but if we can, he's got to price it up for us, and we create that dashboard and you like it, then could you not just give that to every trust? Because it would just be so much better than what they get now on that rag. So we'll see, hope so.
Absolutely. Okay, so I am conscious of time, so I'm going to move on to the last one now. So again, I'm going to drag you in if you've moved off my screen. So last topic in here is threats. So thinking around, okay, we've got these plans, we've got so long, let's say we've got 6 months now until the next staff survey cycle begins, but what could potentially be a danger to that we need to be aware of, and perhaps need to think of what our contingencies if something impacts the teams that we're working, or something happens in the organisation, or there's a big change on the horizon. And these might be things, which are general, which could apply to any trust. Maybe there's things specific to your trust if there's some significant changes happening, but just pop those on here, and I'm sure it'll give us all some food for thought into what those risks could be and what sorts of mitigations we can put in. So what sorts of contingencies we can put in to try and navigate potential risks that could be on there. Okay, fab, some great things coming in. Well done everyone with using whiteboard. I must admit I'm really impressed with this approach. I know it's been around for a while, whiteboard, but we've always used Jamboard as that simple, accessible way. But I really am seeing a lot of value in this. So well done for everyone with engaging with this.
I love the heart stickers and the little emoticons you can do.
Yeah, it's fab. And these are sorts of things we can build on, because it's sort of an infinite workspace. These are things which we could build on over time as well. And maybe when we get to this time next year, or even as we come up to the next staff survey, we can reflect back on these sorts of things and help us think around, actually, what might we like to change about what we did this year, or what's done really well, or what have other trusts done really well that we can again pinch with pride and share with each other. Brilliant. So just to summarise some of these things, Christine, you put results being interpreted negatively and that impact on staff morale. Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge, and I think that's a great thing around what Sam was mentioning before, around when we've tried to present it back to divisions, we've started with the positives. And I know I'm always saying this to team leaders doing TED, kick off with your positives, because that helps to build that foundation and that feeling of more confidence and resilience when you come to tackle those more tricky things or things that might be more of a concern. But yeah, excellent point. Someone's mentioned turnover. Yeah, so that can be difficult, that you might get part way down the line and then a manager changes, or a significant change happens in the team, so that can impact. So again, it's worth perhaps thinking around what that might mean. Is the potential for that to happen? You know, what's going to be that consistent part of our approach, and perhaps how do teams make sure that it's not just all reliant on one manager or one individual in a team to drive this, and certainly that they're not just relying on OD or workforce support, that there's multiple people involved with that process. Someone's mentioned impatience with the process. Yeah, I think we can all be guilty of that sometimes. You know, we especially in OD, I think sometimes we can look at that data and think, yep, this is what needs to be done. But sometimes we don't take account of the complexity sometimes, or the challenges that other teams have in making this sort of stuff happen, because it's not as simple as just having one TED. There's perhaps much other factors involved in there, and how's that action plan going to work for that team. So yeah, I think it is important to be realistic with any of the things you set out to do. And again, something that I really like about what Sam's put together there is, because we've got those sort of measures and different things that we're measuring, it might be that we look at it next year and a team's gone from 6 areas of concern to just 5, and they're still one of those challenged teams. But even if there's that small increase and they've improved in one area, we're starting to see those shoots. So it gives us that reassurance to keep going, keep trying at things, and it helps to energize the team and ourselves that we are doing the right thing. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that there because I am very conscious of time, and just come back to our slides to wrap up. Thank you everyone for sharing. I think that's really useful, and we will share those outputs with you in our follow-up email from today. All right, just come back to our end. So just to get your feedback, really, I'm going to pop a link into the chat. You might need to copy that. I'm not sure if it's come through as a link, or you can use the QR code, but it would really help us if you give us feedback on today's session. Let us know what's been really useful, if you'd like to see anything else added, and most of all, give us your suggestions for future events. We want to keep these relevant for you and think around what can really help you in using TED out there in your organizations. And there might be things that we can provide, or there might be things that you want to provide as well. You know, don't feel it's things we have to deliver. We're always open to your suggestions and things you can bring to these sorts of events. So if you can, either scan that QR code or click on that feedback link and let us know how you found today's session. And then finally, just to give you an idea of the next steps. So what we'll be doing, we'll collate those outputs, we'll send you that follow-up email, we'll still be keeping in touch with your trust with follow-up catch-up meetings. But for you, just think around how is your TED data looking with staff survey data. Keep giving us your feedback if you find out anything on those two-factor authentication things that might help us implement this in the right way. And really just keep us informed, and we'll help wherever we can. Just to signpost you to our next event, our next coffee catch-up is on the 9th of April, so I think that's a couple of weeks away. We've got a lunch and learn at the end of April, which we're going to focus on using TED with an agile working team. And our next quarterly deep dive is in June. Gosh, the year flies by. But on the 27th of June, we're going to focus on more mid-year planning, so maybe what's that journey been from now with your staff survey results, that mid-year point, and also how TED can be used for continuous improvement. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been wonderful to see you all, and I hope you all have a lovely Easter break if we don't see you before, but I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
you.
Cheers. Bye.
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 Thank you very much. Bye-bye.